playing a 750 Battle March game today, using the new Battle March book, and playing the first scenario in the book with a bridge in the middle. To determine the first turn, we've got a duel in the middle of the bridge, and it's the Spider Rider champion fighting against one of the squigs. Spider's initiative 4. It hits. It doesn't wound.
One hit. The squig. What toughness are you? 3.
Yeah.
It doesn't wound.
And there's 2 attacks from the boss. So 1 hit, which wounds. So the boss kills the squig and gets first turn for the Troll Horde.
For my 750 point Night Goblin Battle March list, we're starting off with my Night Goblin War Boss. He's got light armour, he's got a Charm Shield and Sword of Might. We've then got my level 1 Odd Git. He's got the Ruby Ring of Ruin and Earthing Rod. For his spell, I've just taken the signature spell Itchy Nuisance. We've then got my 19 Night Goblins. They've got thrusting spears and shields. I've given them a full command and Banner of Renown. So that's the +1 to combat resolution, but it's a single use. They've got 1 fanatic. We've then got 15 archers with full command. I've given them the Spider Banner, given them poisonous attacks. They've also got a fanatic. We've got a squig herd, and then 2 stone trolls with great weapons, and I've got my mangler squig to finish off.
For the Troll Horde today, there's a level 3 Orc Weird Knob with Troll Magic, and it's got Scroll of Deathly Whispers, Earthing Rod, and the Warding Talisman. And then there's 10 Spider Riders with full command, light armour, shields and spears, and short bows. Goblin Wolf Chariot. And then there's a unit of 4 Stone Trolls with great weapons. And lastly, 4 Common Trolls with 2 hand weapons each. For spells, got Fetid Whirlpool, Troll Brains, and Big Smarts. So the trolls are going to get the first turn because they won the challenge. On the side of the river, got the Night Goblins lined up here. And then there's the Troll Horde lined up here on the other side of the bridge. It started the Troll Horde's turn. We decided to use the weather table for this game and got the lightning, and it's ended up hitting the wizard. So we'll see how many hits he gets. 1. Which doesn't wound him, so he's okay for now. End of turn 1 movement. Both the troll units passed their stupidity and then managed to cast Big Smarts here. Tried to Fade to Dispel it, but it managed to pass. The 2 troll units have moved up to just to the edge of the river, and then the chariot has moved up here. On this side, they've got moved through cover, but they decided to just move up 7 inches so they could try and shoot this turn. The spiders tried to shoot here, but didn't get any wounds.
So this is the end of the first movement phase of round 1. I didn't get struck by lightning, thankfully. I'm playing quite cautiously because Ed's moved quite a lot, even with the trolls, because he's past stupidity. So over here, my Mangler rolled quite high with 15 inches movement, but it wasn't quite enough to get into the trolls because of the difficult terrain. So I've just moved him off to the side, out of arc of the troll, so it doesn't get charged. I've moved my Night Goblins up so they don't get a -1 for half range, so they can shoot without penalty. My Trolls and Night Goblins here have just shuffled up, ready to sort of receive a charge from the Chariot and Trolls here. I wasn't quite sure what to do with the squigs. I know that movement's quite high with the spiders, so these guys are going to get charged anyway, so I'd rather it happen further up the board, where the spiders might sit in the river. I tried to cast Itchy Nuisance on the trolls, but I failed because they've got -1 magic. So we're at end of shooting and end of turn. I cast Ruby Ring on the trolls, and even with their -1, I managed to cast it. I managed to get 6 hits, and fortunately for me, Ed didn't roll very well for his saves, so lost 4 wounds, causing a panic check, but he passed that. I then shot my bows at them, poison bows. I did get 1 poison, but I didn't get any wounds.
End of turn 2 movement for the Troll Horde. Quite a lot happened even before moving. So the lightning didn't turn up, fortunately, and then both units of trolls passed their stupidity. However, the Chariot and the Spider Riders failed their impetuous, so the Spider Riders have charged over here. In the middle, this unit released their Fanatic, and because the Chariot had failed its impetuous, it had to charge, but was able to charge into the archers. But it took 1 wound to stand and shoot, and then the Fanatic went sideways through the Chariot and killed it. Because of the Fanatic, this unit had chosen not to charge, because if they'd charged in here, then the Fanatic probably would have hit both units. Also, the Shaman managed to cast Troll Brains onto this Mangler. He actually rolled a miscast and then rolled a double 6 on the miscast, so he got cast with perfect invocation, but now it can't cast anything more. This unit of trolls, they decided to go over the river and just get up to an inch away from them. It was just slightly too long to risk the charge because of the terrain, and they passed their dangerous terrain tests. Here, because this unit went over the river, they had to take dangerous terrain tests as well. They initially failed 3 of them, but fortunately, because they've got moved through cover, they re-rolled and passed them all on the re-roll. End of the combat. The Spider Riders charged in, but did quite poorly. They killed 2 of the squigs, who killed 4 in return. They then broke from combat, managed to get away, but even with move through cover, one of the spiders died because it went back through the terrain. The squigs tried to pursue, but only rolled a 3 for their pursuit, and then because they went into the river as well, one of them died.
So D6 impact hits for my Night Goblin archers from the Fanatic. 5, of course. What's that? 5 wounds. So 5 lovely archers dead. So end of turn 2 movement for the Night Goblins. The Mangler Squig failed his stupidity, had to roll a 3 or less, which he obviously didn't do. The trolls passed their stupidity though. What was next? For charges, I decided to charge the trolls and night goblins into edge trolls. I wanted to make sure I got all my rank bonuses just to give me an advantage over those trolls. Of course, the fanatic decided to move through my archers, losing 5 night goblins. Over here, I needed my squigs to get past the river, so I marched those up, so they just passed, but I did lose one as it got swept away. I cast Itchy Nuisance, which went off, so they are -3 toughness and -3 initiative. I started off with Ruby Ring, but I didn't manage to cast it. I did fail to try and dispel the stupidity here, but unfortunately I didn't get it. I then shot 7 bows into the trolls. I thought it was going to go really well because obviously they're -3 toughness. I managed to get 5 hits through. Obviously poison didn't really matter at this point because I was wounding on 2s. I got 4 wounds on the trolls. Ed failed his saves, but he then decided to roll 3 6s for regen, and because they're troll horde, he got to re-roll the 4th regen, which he ended up rolling a 4th 6, so no wounds were taken. We're at the end of turn 2 for the night goblins. We just had the combat over here between Ed's trolls, my trolls, and the night goblins. In the end, I won through having more ranks. I also did my +1 with the Banner of Renowned. So Ed ended up having -4 to his leadership roll. He ended up failing, and because I double outnumbered him, he ended up breaking. So he ran through the difficult terrain and through my squigs, and losing 1 troll at the end of all of that. My trolls and night goblins did pursue. Luckily I didn't lose anything for coming into the difficult terrain.
Turn 3 movement. This unit passed their stupidity, and even though they're at -3 toughness, they decided they probably needed to charge anyway. They tried to charge here. The stand and shoot they passed their saves against, but then they didn't roll high enough to get into combat, so they're just stuck in the river. They passed their dangerous terrain tests though. Over here, this unit rallied and have just moved back a little bit, but the trolls here, they rolled a double 6 for their attempt to rally and then ran another 8 inches backwards, so very close to the edge of the board now. Also tried to get rid of troll brains again, but didn't roll high enough. End of the troll horde turn. Managed to cast a fetid whirlpool down here, making the water even more disgusting. And then here, bowfire from the spiders managed to kill 3 of the squigs. Also, the shaman used his one use Unquiet Spirits, but didn't get many hits, but did manage to kill 2 of the goblins here.
So to start with, I rolled for the lightning. It struck my fanatic, instantly killing him. I then rolled for stupidity. Both the troll and the mangler squig failed. I also failed to try and dispel the troll brains. So Ed rolled for the whirlpool, but luckily it's just moved 2 inches backwards away from my trolls and night goblins. The night goblins moved back, but the war boss failed the difficult terrain, so he took a wound. The squig herd, they failed their impetuous, so they've charged the spiders, but I was probably going to do that anyway. They did. So Ed stood and shot, killing one squig. So turn 3 shooting for the Night Goblins. Again, I tried to cast Ruby Ring. I failed to do that. I then again tried to shoot at the trolls. I managed to get 1 wound through, but the troll, of course, managed to pass its regen. We then did the combat over here. So doing the combat over here, the squigs managed to kill 1 spider, but the spiders managed to take the squigs down to 1 squig. Failing their leadership test. The squigs do go wild, but there wasn't enough in that unit to cause any damage to the spiders. So the spiders just reformed.
End of turn 4 movement. There was no lightning this turn. The fetid whirlpool moved in the same direction it had moved before, but away from these units, unfortunately. This unit passed their impetuous and will just turn to face here. The trolls that were here, they failed their leadership, so they've run off the board now. Managed to cast Troll Brains. It managed to dispel Troll Brains, but then it got recast successfully onto the Mangler. Here, the Stone Trolls, they passed their stupidity. And this unit of archers, they released their Fanatic. The Trolls decided to charge anyway and went through the Fanatic. Initially, the Fanatic only did 1 hit, which they passed their regen against. And then the Fanatic then moved again, going back through them. But they passed 3 regens against it, so it hasn't done any wounds. However, they did take 1 wound to the stand and shoot for charging against the archers. End of the turn. This unit shot at the trolls. They did 1 wound, but they passed their regen. Here, though, these trolls did really well. They killed 7 of the goblins and didn't take any wounds in return. And then the goblins broke and got run down by the trolls. The trolls had chased them but failed to reform, so they're facing off this way.
So this is actually end of turn 4 for the Night Goblins. I haven't really got much to do. The Stone Trolls passed their leadership. I did roll for lightning, which struck my Mangler squig. Luckily, he did only take 1 wound. I would have been very upset if it died to the lightning after not doing anything all game because of Troll Brains. So the trolls just sort of moved around. The Night Goblins sort of shuffled backwards. There wasn't really anything else for me to do. I rolled for the Fanatic, which flew into the trees and died.
Turn 5 movement. First of all, the lightning struck and ended up killing one of the Spider Riders. The Spider Riders then failed their impetuous, so they've charged into the trolls. They had to go through the water again, and again initially failed 2 of their dangerous terrain tests, but then fortunately passed on the rerolls. Over here, thanks to being leadership 7 now, they passed their stupidity and have turned around, but they can't really do anything else anymore. Tried to dispel Troll Brains, but failed to dispel it, and then the Shaman has just moved slightly further away in case this passes and gets an extremely good roll. Also, chose to get rid of the fetid whirlpool, which was fortunate because the Spider Riders would have charged through it. End of Trollhorde turn 5. Recast the fetid whirlpool onto the bridge here. And then in this combat, the spiders killed one of the trolls and then, put the last wound on one of the trolls and put a wound on the other one. And then the one remaining troll hit and wounded with all 3 of its attacks, so killed all the spiders and then passed its restraint.
So this was the last turn. Miraculously, the Mangler Squig rolled a double 1 to pass its stupidity test. And then we checked for the arc to see if it could charge into the trolls. Unfortunately for Ed, they just could get in with a 12-inch charge. And I did roll 13 for my movement, so the Mangler Squig did manage to get into the trolls. Ended up killing blowing the remaining trolls. So a pretty dramatic ending for the Mangler Squig, who has been stupid all game but managed to sort of bring it back right at the end.
Okay, so end of the game, and it's a win for the Night Goblins. There's only the Shaman left on the board. Turn 5 was just terrible, basically. The spiders failed their impetuous on their turn and went into the trolls, and despite killing one of the trolls and doing 1 wound, then that troll killed all 3 of them, so they lost all their points there. And then here, the trolls had passed their stupidity in their turn and reformed, and I thought they were out of arc. But then, in their turn, the Mangler passed its stupidity on a double 1 and then got enough movement to get into combat with them, killing blowed 2 of them and did the 1 wound it needed to kill the other one, so they didn't get to attack back. Because otherwise they would have probably killed the Mangler at least. If that hadn't happened, then it would have been a very close game.
So this was our first Battle March game. I didn't really know what to think of Battle March, because I definitely really do enjoy the larger games, but I don't think I was missing out on anything, so I really enjoyed the smaller format. It's definitely more thematic. Definitely everything counts. It was, for most of the game, it was pretty close. The trolls that were making their way over here were really frustrating because they just kept passing their regen saves, and obviously taking out my archers and Oddgit. It was really frustrating, obviously, with the troll brains with the Mangler Squig, so he was out of the game pretty much for all of it, and it was only a miracle that I rolled a double 1 and the trolls finally got what they deserved, if I'm going to be honest. So big win for the Mangler. Over here, it was unfortunate for the trolls just to pretty much just break and run off the board completely. But the idea was to use my Night Goblins and trolls just to sort of tip the balance in combats. Obviously, you got the strength with the trolls, and then the combat res, and the +1 for the banner. So it was pretty much like the +1 for the banner that kind of clutched, making the trolls ran. The Fanatics, I think I used the Fanatics quite well, sort of making the Ed's chariot having to sort of direct into the archers, because obviously he took some wounds in the standing and shooting. I've definitely learnt how Ed likes to play, so I've started to sort of be a bit more cautious, which has actually helped, because usually I'm quite a very forward direct player, but it's paying off just to sort of take moments to think.
A lot of that's just trying to play around the Fanatics a bit.
But I did think it was a close game until the last round, and it could have gone either way from turn 4 onwards.
Thanks to Michael for the game, and thanks for watching.